Thank you, Presiding Officer. And let me, through the Chair, just say a couple of words to Andy Whiteman. He gave us a 40-year horizon since housing associations came into play. Well, there was the digest of Justinian, which covered the cooperative housing associations in ancient Rome, and indeed 2,500 years ago there were cooperative models in Babylon. So we've come to the party quite late in Scotland, I might suggest. Now, members might reasonably ask why I'm speaking in this debate. I forced my way to the front of the long queue that the whips had drawn up to fill the last speaking place from the government benches. The temptation, of course, for my part was when I read in the committee report at paragraph 10, the bill is short and technical. Now, the word "and technical" is what, of course, inevitably draws me in. I think it's fair to say that this is not the most contentious thing that we've debated since I came to Parliament in 2001. But it is quite interesting because it does illustrate some of the unintended side effects that come from revising the way in which we do accounting, in particular of bodies that have to report their assets, liabilities, their income and expenditure. And I found in 2001, under the old FRS 17 accounting standard, when I looked at the accounts for Kilmarnock Prison, because I was interested in prisons at that time, that because the PFI contractors, Kilmarnock Prison Limited, had a commitment in the 30-year contract that they had to pass the prison to the government, they treated it as a disposal in the second year of trading. So it vanished off their balance sheet as an asset, but for the government concerned, it was not an asset in their balance sheet until 30 years hence, when it appeared in their balance sheet. So you actually had a period of virtually 30 years where that asset appeared on nobody's balance sheet, and that was under the old system. Now, we're now under IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standard. We now have a new thing called contingent assets, which means in the similar circumstances, it's now on Kilmarnock Prison Limited balance sheet and on the government's balance sheet, so it now appears on both balance sheets. But the bottom line about all this in relation to the issue that's before us today is that we need to get the right balance as to where things appear in our public accounting. Now, the problem that's been presented to us by the Office of National Statistics, a perfectly proper problem for them to present us with, is that were these associations in a place where they had sufficient freedom of action that they could control, manage, dispose, buy assets without the government telling them what to do? And that's a question. The next kind of question is, were they creating assets for the government? And the final question is, were they, by their actions, creating involuntary liabilities, contingent or otherwise, for the government? And it was the uncertainties in these accounting areas that I think properly caused the Office of National Statistics to say, we've got these bodies out there that are connected to the public sector, although they're private bodies, as Mr. Whiteman reminded us. Do they really form part of the public sector? And of course, that would inhibit government in its spending plans, and more fundamentally for the policy that we're interested in here, inhibit the ability of these societies to borrow money and build housing. Because Alec Rowley is perfectly correct, we've got to build more houses, whatever means we do it by. Yes, I will.
Elaine Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank Mr Stevenson for taking an intervention. I wondered, in reading about the bill, did he also come across comments by UK Finance where they said that the lenders might have to ramp up their due diligence, and I quote them directly, and I wondered what he thought about that particular point that was being made.
Well, concluding, please.
I was very pleased that UK Finance got themselves to a position of supporting what's proposed. Initially, I gather there was a bit doubt. Presiding Officer, I think Elaine Smith makes a very valid point. whenever you change the system, you risk creating more complexities. And if that gets in the way of our building more houses, making life more difficult for housing associations, that's not good news. But I think the bill strikes the right balance, Presiding Officer, and I shall be very happy to support it come decision time.